Today, we will hear from people in white communities speaking on how they are taught to fear Black men and uphold racism. Check it out.
I'm a racist, formerly a racist. Thank you, T, for asking this question and specifically asking me to do a video. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Janelyn. I have been talking on this app about how I was born and raised in the Deep South, raised to be a racist, and how I've been breaking that down for the last 15 years. I don't think I was taught to hate you as much fear you. And I think that plays into fearing Black men on top of that. As a woman, I do think that men can be a threat to us. Not that we need to walk around scared all the time, but we do, have to be cognizant of that. And so once you are being told Black people hate you, they're dangerous, they're criminals, they're in gangs, and then you layer on top of that being a 5'1" woman, it's just like that automatic connection of Black men. Combine those two things is like the most dangerous. I don't ever feel unsafe with Black men. If I'm at the gas station or at a kid's event or at the park, I'm probably not overly concerned with my safety most of the time, but I definitely don't have that same reaction if I see a Black man in my space. Yeah, definitely not from the color of their skin anymore. To just more pointedly answer the question, I think I was taught to fear Black people, and then also learned that men can be a threat. So when you put those two things together, it was like the ultimate threat. And that's something that I've definitely had to work through and just like remind myself over the years. If I am in a situation where I see a Black man and I do have some type of reaction in my head, to be like, what is that based on? Where does that come from? Have you ever had any interaction where that was true? And just like kind of talk myself down. I hope that helps kind of understand it a little bit better. Obviously, not saying any of this is right, but when you come from this background where it's been ingrained into you, just trying to like understand it and pull those layers apart and break it down. I'm just trying to show like the truth of that progression.
Absolutely, white parents are teaching their white children to hate Black and Indigenous and people of color. There is a reason that the largest domestic terrorist threat that the United States continues to face is white supremacists, and that's according to the FBI database. My personal experience with this is that I grew up with a father that was incredibly racist. I have a biracial family, and I am the second youngest of 8 siblings. When I was younger than 10, my biological father made me beat my Black older brother with a mop handle while yelling, "Beat that N-word's ass." At first I refused, but then he started beating my ass. And then my brother told me to just do it. My mother eventually remarried after my biological father died. This man was a Democrat and a decent enough guy, but he loved to use the N-word. He would say, "I'm not your N-word." He would say, "They're acting like N-words." Until one day when my younger sister, who is Black, broke out into tears telling him that she wasn't okay with it. So what I've come to figure out is that if a white parent is not actively anti-racist, they will teach their children to hate Black and Indigenous and people of color, whether or not it's intentional.
Man, I tell you what, nothing makes racist white people more pissed off than me, a white person, trying to educate about racism and trying to educate about what white privilege is and all these things. And it's so funny because these same people will argue with me till they are blue in the face about how they're not racist and we don't live in a racist institution and Black and brown people have it so easy and racism doesn't exist anymore. But then they will turn around and say the most racist, ignorant, vile shit you've ever heard in your life. The disconnect is amazing. And this is why I make content like this, because it's so important, because we do live in a racist institution and we are all raised in racism as white people. This is simply a fact. And the crazy part about it is every one of us knows this. Even the ones who will sit there and fight with me to the death about it and act like it doesn't exist. Y'all know white people are racist. Y'all know about the casual racism, the casual microaggressions that we are raised in, no matter where we live in this United States of America. And this is why I will never stop. I will never stop trying to educate as a white person about racism and how we need to learn. We need to evolve. We need to do better. It's almost as if they feel like admitting to a racist institution or admitting to racism makes them this evil, terrible person. And so they would rather double down than to grow and be a good person. And that's so bad, because all that says to me is that you have a small mind and a cowardly soul.
Hi, I'm Kylie, and here are the top 5 ways that hatred is passed on in white families. This is definitely a topic that not a lot of white people like to talk about because they prefer to stay race neutral, or at least not air their dirty laundry in public, but I do have some things that I want to say. The first way that white people pass on hatred to their kids is literally at the dinner table. I can't even tell you how many times I'd be at another white person's house growing up, and their mom or dad would say something racist and look to their kid like they made a joke and wait for the kid to react. So in that way, the racist remark serves almost as a point of bonding between the parent and the child. The second way that it's passed on is in sports, especially if a white family or a white team is playing against a team that is primarily people of color. White people will say racist things. Did you see that defender? She was really aggressive, and other microaggressions that get passed on to the child. The third way is by discouraging their children from being friends with people of color because of certain innate qualities that they may have. Number 4, moving their kids to an all-white suburb. Number 5, praising celebrities and politicians that are racist.
This is who we've always been. The problem is that white people have their heads up their asses still. Too many of you still just don't want to accept what this is. So let me give you a history lesson of what this shithole country is. And if you don't like that, then you can ship your ass back to England with your head up your ass, because you don't actually want to hear the history of America. So let me tell you what this country is. When we as white people were too lazy to do our own jobs, we stole black people from Africa on the Middle Passage. 1.2 million died. Sharks would follow the boats, waiting for the bodies. Then we kept them as fucking animals, beat them, whipped them, put them in trees, fed them to fucking alligators, burnt down their Wall Street. Then we put Asians in internment camps. Women couldn't even fucking vote or have rights or credit or no-fault divorce until the 80s. 1860s, the Supreme Court said black people weren't even citizens. And part of this country doesn't want to fucking hear that. I'm a patriot. You're a piece of shit, is what you are. You're not a fucking patriot. You're a nationalist. You don't want to actually talk about American history. You want to talk about white history, which is why you don't want slavery in the Smithsonian, because it offends your version of American exceptionalism. We are a shithole country. We're not even the greatest country in North America. And once again, if you don't like it, ship your ass back to England.
Racism is about jealousy. If you think that's a reductive statement, please stick with me. When I say jealousy, I'm talking about insecurity, which is really what jealousy is, but I think it's easier to understand if I say insecurity rather than just jealousy. Because we know from appropriation that we are very jealous of other cultures. Why would we want to listen to the music, eat the food, wear the clothes, do the hairstyles, have everything, the language, but not give credit where credit is due and not uplift the people who created it? White people are so lost in feeling like they don't have a connection to culture, especially many of us who are very far removed from our European roots. And I think the need to fill that space and that insecurity of this lack of culture and lack of something to call our own is often filled with cultural appropriation and the idea that being white is superior. I was first introduced to this concept of racism being jealousy in college, and I can't trace it back to one particular scholar, but I would like to give credit where credit is due to that Black scholar. If you can find anything tracing it to one particular person, please leave that in the comments. I think it's important to think about racism in this way if we want to unlearn it. Because, as some people say who are non-monogamous, or anyone who's just working on their relationships, jealousy is an indicator that something is not quite right with us. It's an indicator of our insecurity and how we might be feeling. It's not about what our partner is doing or what someone on Instagram is doing with their life that makes us feel inadequate. It's about something going on inside. And I think we really need to interrogate that. What is it about people of color showing excellence, people of color maybe being more in touch with culture, people of color being more in touch with the environment, people of color making better food, and everything else that we envy, what does that trigger in us? And why do we have the need to put those people down? It's about jealousy. And if we can figure out that we're feeling that way and trace that feeling back to maybe some of our unconscious biases, I think it's a lot easier to start thinking about, how can we unlearn that? How can I feel secure in my identity as a white person who has roots in maybe Italian, like other cultures, but like doesn't really feel connected to anything? How can I feel secure in myself to not want to put others down, whether that be racism or any other form of discrimination, or just plain hating on another woman because she's amazing? You know, I think this makes it seem like racism is very simple, but it also just helps us frame it in a way that's accessible to us. We know that dismantling racism starts with individual work, and personal growth is all about thinking about the hard things about yourself, the things and parts of yourself that you don't like. And jealousy is one of those things. No one wants to be jealous. It's an awful, awful feeling. And we don't want to admit that we're jealous. And we shy away from that, but it's something we can interrogate. And I think that is going to help us go a long way.
The problem with racism in America is that too many white people believe it's simply about conscious hate, about burning crosses, slurs, or open hostility. But racism is much bigger, much deeper, and far more deceptive than that. Racism is not just a personal attitude, it's a system. A complex network of social, political, and economic levers and pulleys set up generations ago to keep working on behalf of white people, whether they're aware of it or not. This system operates like an autopilot of inequality. It doesn't need a racist person to function. It just needs the system to stay in place. Schools that favor certain zip codes, job markets that overlook certain names, police systems that criminalize certain skin tones, and court systems that excuse certain crimes. Racism is an insidious cultural disease. It doesn't care if you're a white person who claims to love black people. It will still find a way to infect how you see, judge, and treat people who don't look like you. It shows up in policies, in hiring decisions, in zoning laws, in neighborhood watch calls, and even in the quiet silence of those who claim neutrality while standing inside unjust systems. Yes, racism often looks like hate, but hate is just one symptom. It also looks like privilege, unearned advantages that white people inherit simply by existing in a world designed for them. It looks like access, the ability to move freely through systems that block others. And it looks like ignorance, the refusal to learn, to listen, to acknowledge that the playing field has never been equal. Even America's so-called fair systems carry the fingerprints of white supremacy. Look at fair housing alliances, equal opportunity programs, or even the justice system itself. Scratch the surface, and you'll find the same pattern. White people create, fund, and control the very systems that claim to fix the problems they caused. They write the rules, enforce the rules, and then tell the oppressed to play by those rules. It's like a magician's trick, creating both the problem and the illusion of the solution. And nowhere is this hypocrisy clearer than in the white church. For centuries, churches and seminaries have tried to separate Christian identity from the violence committed against black people. They preach forgiveness and charity while standing silent on slavery, segregation, as if the gospel of Christ could coexist with the whip, the rope, and the burning cross. Don't talk about charity drives. The Ku Klux Klan had poor relief programs too, but that didn't make it any less of a terrorist organization. Church records from Klan meetings show dues, elections, and even charity work, all while spreading terror among black families. And, to this day, the white church still hasn't fully owned up to its role in sanctifying and protecting racial violence in America. This refusal to confront the violence embedded in America's religious institutions explains why every other form of violence, from mass shootings to police brutality, continues unchecked. You cannot build peace on top of unacknowledged terror. Then there's capitalism, which feeds off racism like a parasite. The cries for law and order and hard work are rarely about justice or morality. They're about protecting a thing-oriented society, not a people-oriented one. Capitalism turns human beings into profit margins and labor tools, dehumanizing those at the bottom, who, conveniently, are overwhelmingly black people. White supremacy and capitalism are twins, born of greed, sustained by fear, and justified by myths of superiority. You can't dismantle racism without also confronting the capitalistic spirit that measures worth by wealth instead of humanity. And that fear, that deep, centuries-old white fear, is the real heartbeat of racism. Fear of losing control, fear of equality, fear of accountability. From the plantation to the police station, that fear has been the fuel. It's why laws were written to limit black progress. It's why black neighborhoods are underfunded. It's why every black movement for justice is met with suspicion and backlash. This nation was built on a foundation of bias, bigotry, and control, and that indoctrination was handed down through generations. It's so ingrained that it feels normal, even to those who claim to reject racism. And yet, here we are in 2025, still fighting for equality in education, housing, healthcare, employment, and justice, the same battles our ancestors fought a century ago. So the real question is not why black people are still angry, but why white America is still comfortable. Why is it that wherever black people live, work, or rise, someone always has a problem with it? That problem isn't ours, it's theirs. Racism is not a black problem. It's a white problem that infects the entire society. Tell me what you think about this topic. Hope you find the information in this video informative. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Thanks for watching.